When it comes to developing yourself, when it comes to growing yourself in any capacity, in any domain of life, developing a consistent reading habit is an absolutely crucial component of the process. While various practices such as meditation, contemplation, journaling, going to therapy, working with a life coach, traveling, and exposing yourself to a variety of new experiences can certainly go a long way in raising your consciousness and expanding your comfort zone and making you feel better about yourself and more happy and more lively. But without a consistent reading habit, it is going to be impossible to develop the deep, nuanced, multidimensional, and multi-perspectival mind required for becoming the most you can become in this lifetime. Without reading, you will probably just become paradigm locked in a certain rigid worldview, likely just the worldview and the belief structure that you absorbed from your culture that you grew up in. And the possibilities for you and what you can become will be radically limited if you do not read a lot of books. So you should make reading a daily, consistent practice, because books are essentially an author's deepest life insights and wisdom neatly packaged into a couple hundred pages. And there are decades of wisdom from the world's most brilliant minds just sitting on the shelves waiting for you to absorb their wisdom. And so at this point in my journey, I've read well over 100 books when it comes to personal growth, and there are still so many more books that I want to read, but the reality is time is limited. Life can be busy, and because of that, we can only read so many books in our lifetime. And because of this limitation, it's just important that the books that we do read actually help us, that they actually make you more happy, a more conscious, and more loving person who is living their purpose and becoming the person they are meant to become in this lifetime. And so here I present to you the top 10 books that have been most impactful on my life so far. And just to preface, if you know me and my channel, there's quite a spiritual undertone to this channel. This channel is about full spectrum human development, and I tend to lean pretty heavily on the spiritual side of things, on the much farther reaches of human nature and human consciousness. So this list is obviously going to reflect that, but there's also a number of more practical scientific books as well. And one more thing before I begin, if you want my full book list with a 1 through 5 star rating for each book that I've read, then just head to my website and check out the book list. The link to that will be in the description. So now, without further ado, let's begin. So coming in at number 10 is the only fiction book on this list. And it's important I say this because you should not discriminate against fiction. Fiction, in my experience, can be just as powerful, if not more powerful in some ways, than reading nonfiction, than like reading a normal self-help book. So, of course, you have to know what type of story you're getting into. Many people just read fiction, just for like the dopamine hit. Like many women just like read romance novels because it like excites them. Don't be like that. Choose your fiction consciously. Choose a really good story that will open you, will expand you. But specifically, number 10 on this list is read this book, Beyond Azara by Dr. Martin Ball. This book illuminates a lot of nuances and intricacies about how ego manifests in collective institutions, specifically religious institutions in this book. But the insights, in my opinion, would apply to all collective groups. So this book tells the story of a young man named Gendru, a monk in the psychedelic religion known as Azara, who is soon to take his vows that would put him into a lifelong status of being a monk. And prior to taking these vows, Gendru meets a man named Sherlock, who is known as an outcast to the Azarians. And he's known as an outcast because, well, they think he has these wacky and outlandish beliefs that just don't align with the religion. And in meeting this man, Gendru has insights, realizations, and awakenings that forever alter the course of his life. That's all I'm going to say here. I can't spoil the book. It's fiction, so I really can't say much. It's a really good book, though. But I will say I literally could not put this book down. So if you are interested in understanding the ego and how it manifests in collective institutions, and if you're interested in spiritual awakening and embodying spiritual awakening, this is one of the very best books that you could read. I'm a niche guy. This is a niche book. I think this book probably has not even 1,000 copies sold in its lifetime. It's a hidden gem, and you need to pick up this hidden gem now. So now coming in at number 9 is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And this is a much more mainstream book, and also probably one of the most best-selling books of the 20th century, and for a very good reason. This book was perhaps the second or third personal development book I ever read back when I was 16 years old, and I truly believe if I had not read this book, I would not have gone on to do the work I am doing currently as a life coach, or at least I would not have gone on and come into the profession as quickly as I have. Because at the time of reading this book, I was a very shy teenager with very subpar social skills, and in being an INFJ personality type, if any of you are familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality typings, I am just naturally wired as my INFJ personality type to experience deep connections with other people. Like, the surface level stuff just does not satisfy me at all. It actually really drains me. So my shyness really withheld me from experiencing what my heart desired, which was to have these, deeper, more intimate bonds with people. And through reading this book, I gained various insights and received practical tools on how to connect with other people better. And through applying the information, I can see how this branched into deepening various connections that I already had and helped form various new bonds as well. And the thing is, this book is actually mostly about forming those more surface level connections. It's just that I was so bad at the initial stage of getting to know a new person or a new friend that the deeper part was just not even really possible in many cases. And still, of course, it's good to have acquaintances. It's good to have those more surface level connections in your life. So still that this book can help you so much with that. And yeah, you naturally have to just go through that stage. So this book helped me with that and brought a lot of good things into my life. And although this book talks in 1930s language, because that's when the book was published, the insights still apply extremely well in the present day. That's why the book still sells so many copies today. So if my words really resonate with you here, I highly recommend picking up the book. And now number 8 on this list is Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence by Dr. Anna Lemke. So through the rise of the prevalence of the smartphone, the internet, social media, pornography, junk food, drugs, etc., humanity's dopamine receptors have become collectively fried. Attention spans are getting shorter, people are becoming lazier, more short-sighted, more impulsive, more obese, less motivated, and overall are just having less energy and zest for life. So in the age of this dopamine economy, it is more important than ever to take a conscious approach to optimize the dopamine in your brain. In this book, the author will provide you with all the cutting-edge science on the neurochemical dopamine, which is the chemical primarily responsible for motivation and reward-seeking behavior. And in addition, she will provide various practical tools you can implement to help heal your damaged dopamine receptors and keep them functioning at optimal levels. After reading this book, I started living my life far more consciously and intentionally when it comes to the rewards my brain seeks. So while I'm far from perfect in this domain, it's very hard to escape the dopamine economy entirely. Everything's just vying for your attention. I'm living a much healthier life in part due to reading this book. So I cannot stress enough how important optimal dopamine is for your self-actualization. If you don't have optimal dopamine, you're going to be in this dopamine deficient state and always just seek these short-term rewards, short-term pleasures, and you'll never actually develop the long-term vision and have the motivation to go and actually actualize that vision and become your greatest version. You'll just become locked in this dopamine deficient state. So it's really important. And if you feel your dopamine receptors are just fucking fried, like mine were in many ways and can still be sometimes, then pick up this book. Number 7 on this list is A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose by Eckhart Tolle. For me, this book served as a powerful application of relating deeper forms of spirituality towards discovering and realizing my life purpose. Basically, the premise here in this book is that transcending ego-based consciousness is the key to personal happiness, finding our purpose, and transforming the world. And along the way, he dives very deep into the various ego functions and mechanisms that can withhold the expression of love and truth from our being, keeping you locked in a more selfish, a more egoic state. So if you're a spiritual seeker, if you are looking for meaning and purpose, definitely pick up this book. Number 6 on this list is All About Love, New Visions by Bell Hooks. So there's so much talk from various spiritual teachers and various gurus on love and embodying love, which is great and all, but virtually no one actually puts an actual working definition to love. And through this book, contemporary feminist philosopher Bell Hooks puts a working definition to love, describing love in action as being something that nurtures the spiritual growth and self-actualization of another person. And in calling out the vast lovelessness that pervades our entire society, both individually and collectively, Bell Hooks articulates how we can evoke more love in our lives, both to ourselves, how we can give ourselves more love, and also how we can give more love to others as well. The author gets it. It is love and only love that is going to transform and to save our world and bring our species towards a more united, wholesome existence. I felt called out by some of my own lovelessness in this book, and I feel myself to be a more wise, a more conscious, a more loving person having read this masterpiece. So, this is a must read for anyone on the path of any form of growth. So now things are getting real here with the top 5, guys. I think the top 5 here are orders of magnitude above the others I've spoken about so far. Like, these top 5s has really all had a really profound impact on my life. So yeah, this stuff going forward here is important stuff. So number 5 is LSD in the Mind of the Universe by Dr. Christopher Beisch. This book blew my mind. It is absolutely revolutionary in the field of philosophy. It is completely one of a kind, and I believe that as we go forth in time and in history, that this book, although not super popular currently, it's very niche popular though, I believe that it will become regarded as one of the foundational texts in consciousness exploration, specifically through like a psychedelic medium. And I consider Beisch to be a pioneer of consciousness. And so, this guy Beisch, he was a professor of religious studies, he intentionally, consciously, and therapeutically worked with high doses of the psychedelic substance LSD for multiple decades, and he did this unbeknownst to anyone other than he and his wife and maybe a few trusted friends as well. And all of this was for the purpose of healing and for spiritual awakening. And he didn't tell anybody about this for decades because, well, at the time it was very taboo, and it still today is pretty taboo, maybe less taboo than it was back then in like the 1970s, 1980s when he was doing this stuff. He had to keep it underground because it was certain to get him fired from his job as a professor of religious studies. And so this book is mostly just a sharing of his reports, of his experiences in chronological order, of the various experiences that he had, which throughout the whole time is about 80 or so intentional sessions that Beisch had. And it was really interesting because as he went through these sessions, they continued to deepen and deepen and deepen over time and seemed to have this like organizing principle to how the universe was giving him these various experiences. And over time, all of his experiences illuminated the purpose of life, the nature of reality, the future of humanity, and how all of this impacted Beisch's life personally. And in reading his reports, I just felt shivers and tingles just ignite throughout my body at times, just in sheer resonance with the various awakenings that I've had throughout my journey. His what he's realized is very in alignment with what I've realized as well, and he also builds much on top of experiences that I've had as well. And this book also just shows that one can consciously engage with these substances and still have a completely normal life and actually be much better off and much more healthy and mature and loving and wise than he otherwise would have been. So, there's a stigma around these substances, but Beisch really showed that this can be something that really heals you and makes you a better person if you use it intentionally. So, centuries from now, when humanity hopefully reaches a more collectively, mature state, I believe this book will be remembered as one of the most unique books of its time, as one of the foundational texts in the field of consciousness exploration, which I think will come to be known as a sub-branch of philosophy. I think the academic philosophy was a little bit behind the times in that regard, but still, this is one of the best books that I've read personally and is a must-read for any spiritual seeker. And number 4 on this list is From the Core, A New Masculine Paradigm for Leading with Love by John Wineland. So it's my take that our world is facing a crisis of masculinity. And I'm not saying this from some like toxic manosphere perspective. What I'm saying is that the crisis of masculinity is that toxic masculinity is rampant. And by the way, toxic masculinity, I just interpret as immature masculinity. It's boy psychology. It's literally just being a fucking boy in a man's body, which is how so many people are. And yeah, this is rampant, and it's destroying the world in many ways through its unconscious and domineering nature. And I've really only met a few men in my life who truly embody a deep, still, grounded, purposeful, mature presence, who are wholeheartedly committed to evoking love and living their full truth in each and every moment. And I will say the author of this book, John Wineland, is someone who seems to get it. This book, in my opinion, is what conscious masculinity is all about. This book is primarily oriented towards deepening romantic relationships and the transmission of love in our day-to-day life. But anyone who reads this book will also just glean how the insights will apply to literally all domains of existence. And if you're familiar with the work of David Deida, it may benefit you to know that Wineland was a student of David Deida, so his insights are quite similar to Deida's. And while I've read a bit of David Deida's work, and I think it's really, really solid, I did find his language in his books to just be a little bit cringe at times, a little bit like dramatic, and sometimes a little bit socially uncalibrated. I thought he was a little bit too in the clouds. And Wineland's voice is more grounded and more practical, while still remaining very, very deeply moving and very inspiring. He takes the best of David Deida's work and he builds upon it. That's how I see it. So through this book, I was able to see so much unconsciousness that I was embodying in my day-to-day life, and especially in my previous romantic relationships. I felt so called out that it was a little painful at times, but hey, that's a good thing to feel called out. It means that you have the awareness to recognize that what you did was, not the most loving, not the best, not the most truthful. So yeah, this is an absolute must-read for any masculine-oriented person, and I even think for all the women out there, you'd benefit a lot from this as well, just to kind of understand. So now, here we are with the top 3 here, guys, and we're just getting fucking real here. These top 3 are orders of magnitude, even more above the top 5. These top 3 here have really had a really profound impact on my life. These are all books that I will come back to and read multiple times because they're that profound. So yeah, here we go, top 3. And so coming in at number 3, we have The Book of Not Knowing, and also another book, because it's a series, Pursuing Consciousness, The Book of Enlightenment and Transformation, both written by Peter Ralston. And so the first book, The Book of Not Knowing, is referred to some as the Bible of Consciousness. And this is for a very good reason. It is the most direct, practical, no bullshit book written for experiencing enlightenment and deepening consciousness. And if you are watching this and you are a little bit turned off by the terms enlightenment or a spiritual awakening, and you think it's kind of woo-woo, this book is not woo-woo at all. It's direct, it's practical, it's complete no bullshit, very easy to understand language, no fluff to it at all. And along the way, every possible mechanism of the ego that prevents the direct experience of truth will be illuminated. And after all, really, the spiritual path is basically just ego transcendence. And so now I feel called to quote the words of another wise teacher of mine, Leo Gura, because it aligns with the insights of this book. And this quote goes, "The ego is puppeteered by psychological and existential forces beyond its comprehension. Survival entirely runs the ego, but the survival is so subtle and so intelligent that the ego is blind to it. But as you do this work, you slowly start to see all the ways your ego acts out and why. Serious development is consciousness of every way in which survival runs your mind. Until then, you're just a sophisticated survival puppet." So I read this quote because Ralston's books are perhaps the very best on the entire planet for becoming aware of these subtle mechanisms of ego that keep you locked in your blind habitual patterns of survival. And it just so happens that as you do this work, you become more aware of truth, which opens the door for a direct experience of this thing called enlightenment to occur. The sequel to this book, Pursuing Consciousness, the Book of Enlightenment and Transformation, is equally as powerful in my opinion, but it dives more deeply into the distinction between enlightenment and personal growth and kind of the interplay and intertwinement between the two. And there's even a third book in the series called The Genius of Being, which I didn't think was quite as good as the other two, but all of these radically altered the course of my life for the better. You absolutely have to read these, and even if you're not a spiritual person, if you or if you think enlightenment is this airy-fairy thing, this book is very practical and very applicable, and it will change your life no matter what. So please, please, for the sake of humanity. So now coming in at number 2 on the list is all Ken Wilber books. Just literally any book that he writes. He has dozens. I think he has 30 or 40. I've read maybe 10 of them at this point, and I'll tell you the ones that I like here. And it's interesting that more people don't think this way, but I truly believe that Ken Wilber is the greatest philosopher in all of human history, or at least he's like the greatest contemporary philosopher. And he's still going, he's still writing, he's getting pretty old, but he's still going. I mean, he's like fairly popular. I think he's like the most published contemporary philosopher, but he's like not world renowned like a Socrates or a Kant or a Nietzsche. And it really takes a certain type of mind to really understand the work that he's communicating. And I do really believe, as more and more people wake up and they develop themselves, that he most definitely will reach that tier of philosopher. And the thing with Ken Wilber is he's hardly ever said anything new. I mean, he has, but he's mostly just synthesized and recontextualized everything that we already know. So Ken Wilber is the creator of integral theory, which is an extremely comprehensive framework that aims to unify a broad spectrum of disciplines, of various Western theories, along with various Eastern traditions and frameworks. And in me being a very psychologically minded person, the most moving aspect of integral theory to me is Ken Wilber's synthesizing of all human developmental psychological research into a single framework. And through learning these various frameworks, read Integral Psychology for brilliant analysis, the way I see and conceptualize people and society has changed forever in a good way. There are shadows to learning this stuff, so it's important to be aware of that. But all of this brought me just towards a greater, more holistic understanding of just the big picture of reality and of people too, which brought a lot of empathy for the people I have on this earth, because really compassion and understanding, they are really the same thing. You can't have compassion for someone unless you understand them. So through Ken Wilber's book, I really feel like I gained just a much deeper understanding of human nature, human psychology, human spirituality, the history of humanity. This framework is really comprehensive and unifying, and it's like I can't possibly explain it to you here. There's so much more to it. You'll have to read his books to find out. But I promise you, if you read a few of his books, and are willing and you're diligent to get through how incredibly dense and comprehensive his books can be, your perspective on life and reality will be radically altered, and your ability to live a healthy, conscious, mature, and more holistic life will just deepen so much. So I'd recommend reading A Brief History of Everything to get an overarching view of the framework, how it relates to history and how humans have evolved. You can actually read The Essential Ken Wilber to get just a really brief synopsis of the theory, but Brief History of Everything will go a bit deeper. I loved Integral Psychology and Integral Spirituality, which helped me gain a full spectrum, comprehensive understanding of the psychological and spiritual development of mankind. Trump in a Post-Truth World was probably my favorite book of Wilber's, as he applied his framework to the present day political sphere in the United States. But I'd recommend reading some other books of his first before you read that one, because it's important to have just a basic understanding of the framework before you read the books where it's about the application of the framework to certain circumstances. And I also am currently reading this book of his called Integral Life Practice, which goes specifically on how to just apply all of this stuff to your day-to-day life. And that's one of the most powerful books I've ever read, probably in the top 5 all time for sure. And I still have like 100 more pages to go, and I still haven't even read The Religion of Tomorrow, which you can see up there, which apparently is like his magnum opus. So there's still so much more to explore in this area for me. And I was even so moved by integral theory that I decided to get my life coaching accreditation from an organization called Integral Coaching Canada, which is the only coaching school in the world, as far as I'm concerned at least, that teaches through this framework. In my eyes, it's the most full spectrum way of coaching that exists, and it just helps maximize the transformation in the lives of the individuals who are being coached. So read Ken Wilber, guys. You guys absolutely have to read Ken Wilber. It's going to change your life. I absolutely promise you. So now we've made it, guys. Now we've made it to number 1 on the list. And yeah, number 1 on the list is Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsch. Books 1 through 3. It's a series. And oh my God, I believe these books are some of the most important texts ever written. The guy who wrote this book, Neale Donald Walsch, he doesn't even actually really claim authorship over it, because he insists that rather the words that ended up on the page were channeled by God, Source, Spirit, Brahman, the universe, through him. So in being disgruntled by the world, Neale wanted answers. And in asking his questions, he would find a clear voice that would speak through him in written form. And in writing this book, Neale would never force anything onto the page. If the voice was there, he would write. If it wasn't, he would not write. So oftentimes he would just awaken in the middle of the night and he knew it was time to write. So these 3 books contain the conversations that Neale had with the clear voice that he calls God. And so through channeling this clear God voice, the entire purpose, structure, and function of the universe, life, and humanity is illuminated. Book 1 is about personal issues. Book 2 is about societal issues. And Book 3 discusses universal truths. In each of these books, I literally got shivers and goosebumps multiple times and was brought to tears on multiple occasions just from like the sheer resonance of the words on the page. No other book in my life has been able to like make me feel so emotional while reading it. Everything that I've learned in my life, like the deepest lessons I've learned through my various insights, realizations, awakening, all of that was kind of reaffirmed throughout reading the text, but there was also just so much that was also just added on top of that as well. These are books that I'll probably read at least 5 to 10 times each in my life because they are filled with just such profound insights in every single page that can be powerfully applied in day-to-day life. I like to open them when I feel I've fallen away from myself a little bit, just when I feel like I've fallen out of touch with myself. And also, this is really important, when reading these books, it's important to just read it with an open mind, an open heart, and just an open emotional body. Don't pay like excessive attention to and analyze the meaning of every single word on the page. Read the book openly and just allow its content to just move you in the way it's meant to move you. Take what resonates and discard what does not. A lot resonated for me. A few minor aspects did not. I think there is, some egoic distortion on Neale's end. I think that distortion is very minimal, but it didn't change the impact of this book and the overall resonance that it had on me. You really have to read it openly and just allow it to just pierce your being. It's a lot different than reading like a Ken Wilber type book where it's like this super dense book with like all this like, advanced language and like kind of like an academic style. It's not like that at all, because in Ken Wilber you have to like analyze super deeply every word, like be super focused while reading it. These books aren't like that. To read these books, just open yourself and receive the download. That's it. That's all you have to do. These 3 books are far and away the best on this list. You got to read them, but read them when you feel the time is right. I think there's a specific time that one should read these books. That's all I'm going to say. Just don't read them impulsively. Just wait for the right time. So yeah, that's the list, guys. That's all I have to say here for today. I hope you enjoyed. These books will turbocharge your development. They're the most important you can read, in my opinion. And just a reminder, you can find my book list in the description, which will contain more books than what I've talked about here, with a 1 through 5-star rating of each book, along with a brief summary. That's it for today, guys. I hope you have a great day, and peace.